In this video, I will give you 13 tips for the auditing and attestation section of the CPA exam to help you beat this beast of exam. So keep watching. Hey future CPAs, this is Ala Abudaya. I'm a licensed CPA in the state of Colorado and I help students pass the CPA exam and become CPAs. If this is your first time here and you're interested in becoming CPAs, start by subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell in order not to miss any of my videos. Auditing concepts may be difficult to understand because an audit requires high-level skills instead of just posting accounting transactions or generating financial statements. To pass the audit part of the CPA exam, you must be able to assess problems and use your judgment to draw conclusions. And that's why you need to put yourself in the shoes of an auditor and understand the tests performed to issue an audit opinion. Here are 13 audit exam tips that will help you pass this part of the exam. Tip number 1. Know your journal entries and reconciliations. Auditors are concerned about overstatements of asset accounts and understatements of liability accounts. This auditing concept is based on the balance sheet formula: assets minus liabilities equals equity. If an asset is overstated, the firm's equity balance is also overstated. And if accounts payable, which is a liability account, is understated, the equity is overstated. The auditor's goal is to audit each balance sheet account to ensure that each account is materially correct. That's why part of an auditor's job is to reconcile accounts and make sure that they add up. In addition, auditors should suggest adjusting journal entries to fix any misstatements. Expect to see both topics on the exam and make sure you're prepared to think critically to answer questions on reconciling accounts and suggesting journal entries. For example, you may be asked to make the proper adjusting entries for any unrecorded liabilities. To search for any unrecorded liabilities, the auditor scans large checks written shortly after the fiscal year end and reviews the account payable detail. And auditor wants to see if the check is paying a liability that was posted to accounts payable. Assume, for example, that a company has a December 31 of a fiscal year and a $5,000 check paid to a vendor on January 10th that was not listed on December 31st in the accounts payable detail. If the client incurred the expense before year end, the auditor should make an adjusting entry to record the $5,000 as an accounts payable as of December 31. I recommend you take the audit part after the FAR exam in order to be familiar with the accrual basis of accounting and with all the financial reporting concepts that an auditor should be aware of when performing the audit. Tip number 2. Study professional skepticism. Professional skepticism is emphasized in 2019. The 2019 audit blueprints add more details on professional skepticism. So, what is professional skepticism? Professional skepticism means having a questioning mind as you conduct the audit and being able to make critical assessment of audit evidence. It is essential to the practice of public accounting and the work of newly licensed CPAs. So make sure to understand the concepts of professional skepticism and professional judgment, and understand personal bias and other obstacles to acting with professional skepticism, such as threats, incentives, and judgment-making shortcuts. Tip number 3. Make sure to memorize the form and content of the 4 types of the audit reports based on the new PCAOB audit report standard. The audit section of the CPA exam expects you to be very familiar with the audit report, which includes several kinds of opinions that vary in their content and layout. Familiarity with the audit report is essential because you could be asked to modify or replace part of an opinion in a document review simulation. Or you may be asked to select which kind of opinion is expressed in a multiple choice question. because of how the exam tests the audit report, the most efficient way to study this topic is to first memorize the standard audit report, which is the unqualified opinion report, and then learn the differences between the other opinion reports, which are the qualified, adverse, and disclaimer opinions, and the separate sections that need to be included for each type of opinion. Make sure to study based on the new PCAOB audit report standard, which made major changes in the audit report format and content. For example, the old audit form inserted the opinion paragraph at the end of the report. However, the new audit report form puts the audit opinion the first paragraph of the report. So make sure to learn the PCAOB standard audit report. Another difference, for example, is that the new audit report now inserts a paragraph for the critical audit matters, which was not inserted in the old audit report. Comment below with other differences between the old and the new audit report form and content. I'd love to hear from you. I want to add that the critical audit matters will be tested in the audit exam starting July 1, 2019. So make sure to study this topic and understand it properly, because you will receive questions on this topic. Tip number 4. Understand the internal controls and flow of transactions. Make sure to understand the control environment, entity level controls, and understand the flow of transactions and design of internal controls. AUD CPA is now testing higher level skills and not only remembering and memorization. They want to make sure that you are thinking and assessing problems and using your judgment to draw conclusions. To learn the skill levels tested in the CPA exam, watch this video which I explain these skills. So you may be given a task-based simulation to evaluate whether internal controls relevant to an audit of an entity's financial statements are effectively designed and placed in operation. The principles of internal control will remain relevant to your accounting career long after you pass the CPA exam. So make sure to give this topic proper time and study it properly to understand it for the exam and for your life career too. Tip number 5. Be clear about segregation of duties. Segregation of duties is a concept that applies to many audit procedures, and every auditor must understand this topic. This concept is the only way to reduce the risk of fraud, particularly fraud committed by employees within a business. Performing an audit may not uncover fraud, which is defined as willful intent to deceive. So make sure that you understand the 3 types of duties that must be segregated among different employees to avoid and reduce the risk of fraud. These 3 duties are the physical custody of assets, authorization, and record keeping. Ideally, 3 separate people should handle these 3 duties. The AUD CPA exam asks many questions on this topic, so make sure that you are clear about segregation of duties. Tip number 6. Understand the audit planning. Make sure to study the engagement letter form and understand the purpose and significance of the overall engagement strategy for an audit or non-audit engagement. The engagement letter is a written agreement between the client and the CPA firm performing the audit, and some components of the engagement letter may be confusing to the CPA exam candidates. An auditor uses judgment when selecting the audit procedures to be performed, and the financial statements are the responsibility of the management and not the auditor. You may be asked a task-based simulation to develop or modify a detailed engagement plan for an audit or non-audit engagement based on planning inputs. So make sure to understand and memorize the engagement letter forms. Tip number 7. Understand how to audit inventory. You may receive a task-based simulation requiring you to observe the performance of inventory counting procedures or to inspect the inventory and perform test counts to verify the ending inventory quantity in an audit of an issuer or non-issuer. Here are some important components of an inventory count. Inventory counts typically take place in a warehouse or retail shop, and the access to the location should be restricted during the count. This ensures that the count is performed using the most recent inventory listing from the accounting system. The second thing you must take into consideration when it comes to inventory is the obsolete inventory. Keep an eye out for obsolete inventory or items that have been inventory for a long time and are not selling. Obsolete inventory should be expensed by writing off the value of the inventory to cost of goods sold. Every inventory audit program requires the auditor to ask company managers about obsolete inventory. The third thing you must know is the tags, the inventory tags. Every physical inventory item is tagged, and the tag lists the number of items, a product description, and the cost of the item tagged. All inventory tags generated from the accounting system must be placed on inventory and checked during the inventory count. The audit test includes several questions on inventory count, so make sure that you understand these concepts. Tip number 8. Understand materiality. Understand materiality as it relates to the financial statements as a whole. Also, make sure to be able to calculate performance materiality or tolerable misstatement for the purposes of assessing the risk of material misstatement and determining the nature, timing, and extent of further audit procedures. Materiality is defined as a dollar amount that is large enough to be relevant to a financial statement reader, and there is not a set dollar amount that is considered material for every audit. The most important aspect of materiality is a misstatement of net income, because net income is a key metric used to value a company. But here is the kicker. During audit planning, the audit staff will decide on a level of tolerable misstatement for each account balance. If, for example, the balance of accounts receivable is $1 million, the auditor may decide that any misstatement greater than $5,000 is material, which means an adjustment needs to be made and an adjusting entry should be posted. Tip number 9. Understand the analytical procedures. You may receive a task-based simulation to evaluate the significance of the differences of recorded amounts from expected values when performing analytical procedures. When an auditor performs an analytical review, he compares balances in the financial statements to see if the relationships are reasonable. This analysis includes a review of trends from one year to the next. It's very likely that you will see a question on the relationship between credit sales and receivables. If the account's receivable balance grows at a faster percentage rate than credit sales, you may not be able to generate enough cash to operate each month. Growing credit sales by 10% will increase profits, but if the account receivable balance is growing by 30%, it may create a cash shortage. Tip number 10. Understand audit sampling. Understand the purpose and application of the sampling techniques in an audit or non-audit engagements. Sampling is defined as applying an audit procedure to less than 100% of the items in a population. Keep in mind, however, that if exceptions are found as samples are tested, the auditor will expand the audit work by testing more items. Assume, for example, that an audit pulls a sample of client checks with a dollar amount of $2,000 or more. The client internal controls require 2 signatures on every check of $2,000 or more, and the auditor selects 50 checks for test work. If the auditor reviews checks that do not have 2 signatories, the sample size will be expanded. An auditor cannot rely on the sample that contains errors because the same error rate may apply to the entire population. Tip number 11. Understand the big picture of the audit. The areas of audit involve a lot of steps, standards, and procedures, and memorizing this information can be helpful. But memorization alone won't earn you the passing grade. Instead, You should understand the big picture of the audit and then memorize the steps within the context of this big picture. If you have trouble memorizing stuff, check this video, which I gave you some tips to help you memorize better. So, you must understand the purpose of the audit and what issues are specific audit steps meant to address, why and how the audit is done. Audit test the high-level skill of analysis and evaluation levels. So you have to understand and master the topics comfortably in order to pass the CPA exam section. Tip number 12. Work on techniques to come up with the right answer. In order to challenge you, the CPA exam gives you more than one answer choice that may seem correct. You must carefully review the choices in order to determine the best possible answer. To find the best possible answer, try to exclude answers containing absolutes, like words, for example, like all, never, always, none, which can indicate an incorrect answer choice because such extreme consistency is usually not realistic in the context of an audit report. To learn more on how to master multiple choice questions and increase your CPA exam score, watch these two videos, which I explain these two topics here. Tip number 13. Use real-life experience to understand the audit process. Even though the auditing process itself is pretty straightforward, having an accurate image in your mind of how auditors complete the audit process and the kinds of questions on their minds can greatly enhance your understanding. Audit candidates have likely taken an auditing class in college, but especially with the audit exam, most of the learning happens with actual experience. If you're planning on going into the auditing profession, consider taking the audit exam after you've worked in the field for a few months. Even better, wait until you've had a busy season and then take the exam. This will make it much more easier to you to study and understand the audit concepts. To learn how to study after the busy season, watch this video, which I gave some tips to help you study after the busy season. For me personally, when I took the AUDIT CPA exam in August 2010, I had around 3 years of auditing experience. So I always used to apply what I am studying in the audit to the real-life audit cases which I am facing during my work. This made it much easier for me to understand the audit material and understand the big picture of the audit and the why behind every procedure performed by the auditor. So I passed the exam from my first try. Comment below with a yes if you are an auditor too. If you don't have an audit experience, that's okay. Try to understand the audit concepts and ask an auditor to walk you through how they would go about completing a typical audit. Then compare the scenarios in the exam questions to your knowledge of what auditors do in real life. While this test does not have as many calculations as the other sections of the CPA exam, you still need to invest a great deal of time to study for it. Make sure to review the audit blueprints, which are found on the AICPA.org website, and to practice the multiple choice questions and the task-based simulations in the sample exams found on the AICPA website. Next week, I will give you the RIG exam tips and tricks to help you pass this exam from your first try. So make sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell to receive the video as soon as I upload it to YouTube. Watch this video to learn how to beat the part of the exam, and watch this video to learn the eligibility requirements to sit for the CPA exam. Remember, go after what you want, pass the CPA exam because you can become CPAs and save the world.